Admiral Keth Voss stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the stars that once belonged to humans. 3 years had passed since the Galactic Coalition drove humanity from known space. 3 years since they declared humans too dangerous for civilized worlds. The victory should have felt sweet, but something was wrong. The Zenthari admiral walked through the corridors of what used to be New Tokyo Station. His people had renamed it Victory Point, but the human designs still showed everywhere. Clean lines, efficient systems, and something else he couldn't name. "Sir," his aide approached with a datapad. "Another report from Sector 7. Keth took the device and frowned. More system failures. The human colonies they had taken over seemed to break down in strange ways. Not violent explosions or obvious sabotage. Just slow, creeping failures that made no sense. The humans had built things to last. Their technology was solid and reliable. Yet every month, more problems appeared. Deep space sensors went dark. Automated systems stopped working. Ancient sites that humans had marked as restricted began showing energy readings. "What do the engineers say?" Keth asked. "They don't understand it, sir. The equipment should work fine. When they run diagnostics, everything checks out normal. But the systems still fail." Keth handed back the pad. He remembered the human evacuation 3 years ago. They had been so calm about leaving. No threats, no promises of revenge. They just gathered their people and ships and sailed into the dark spaces between galaxies. Some coalition members had expected a fight. Instead, the humans simply left. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had been the last human official he spoke with. She was a small woman with kind eyes who worked as a xenobiologist. During the final negotiations, she had tried to explain something about containment duties and monitoring responsibilities. The coalition leadership dismissed her words as desperate lies to avoid exile. "Admiral," another officer called from across the bridge. "We're receiving a distress signal from the Valdorian research station at Kepler." "What kind of distress?" "Unknown, sir." The signal cut off after just a few seconds. Keth felt cold fingers touch his spine. Kepler Station was investigating one of those human-marked sites. The researchers had found some kind of ancient structure buried under the planet's surface. Against human warnings that had been left in the files, they decided to explore it. "Send a rescue team," Keth ordered. "Full military escort." The team reached Kepler 2 days later. What they found made no sense. The station was complete and undamaged. All systems worked perfectly. The research equipment hummed along normally. But every person on the station had vanished. Security footage showed the last days before the disappearance. The research team had been studying artifacts from the underground site. At first, everything seemed normal. Scientists did their work, took notes, ran experiments. But slowly, changes appeared. The researchers began acting strangely. They worked without sleeping. They spoke in perfect unison during meetings. When the cameras caught their faces, their eyes reflected light in ways that human eyes never did. On the final recording, all 37 station personnel stood in the main lab, staring at the camera with those strange, shining eyes. The last image showed them walking toward the artifact chamber. The cameras went dark after that. When the rescue team searched the lab, they found only a thin layer of biological residue coating the walls. It looked almost like shed skin. The rescue team's report reached Keth's desk with a note attached. The station's computers had recorded one final message, repeating over and over in the main database. "The sleepers stir." Keth called his senior staff together. The meeting room felt too large, too empty. These same chairs had once held human representatives during peace talks and trade negotiations. Now coalition officers sat in their place, looking confused and worried. "What do we know about these human restriction sites?" Keth asked. His intelligence officer, a careful Valdorian named Rix, pulled up a star map. Red dots marked dozens of locations across human space. The humans claimed they were archaeological sites of historical interest. They refused to let anyone else study them. "We thought they were hiding weapons," added the military advisor. "Or maybe valuable resources they wanted to keep for themselves. But now..." Keth studied the map. Each red dot represented a mystery that suddenly seemed much more dangerous. "Now we don't know," Rix admitted. "The humans left very little information. Most of their files were encrypted or destroyed before they departed." Keth remembered something Dr. Tanaka had said during those final meetings. She had looked tired, older than her years, carrying some invisible weight. "Some responsibilities cannot be shared," she had told him. "Some burdens must be carried in silence." At the time, he thought she meant human pride. Now, he wondered if she meant something else entirely. Reports continued arriving from across former human space. A Zenthari mining operation on New Shanghai reported equipment failures and strange dreams among the workers. A peaceful agricultural colony experienced mass hysteria when farmers began seeing shadows that moved without objects to cast them. Each incident occurred near one of those red dots on the map. "Sir," his aide approached again. "Long-range sensors are detecting something unusual." "Cry." "Where?" "Multiple locations. Energy signatures from 17 different human restriction sites. They're all activating at the same time." Keth felt the cold fingers again. But this time they wrapped around his heart. Whatever the humans had been guarding, whatever they had been keeping quiet and contained, was waking up. And the coalition was utterly unprepared to deal with it. He thought about Dr. Tanaka and her calm acceptance of exile. Had she known this would happen? Had she been trying to warn them about something much worse than human aggression? In the empty spaces between stars, the human exile fleet continued its journey toward distant galaxies. But their long-range sensors still watched the systems they once called home. Dr. Tanaka sat in her small laboratory, monitoring the same energy signatures that worried Admiral Keth. She had tried to tell them. She had tried to explain that humanity's role in the galaxy was not conquest, but guardianship. They had chosen not to listen. Now the ancient horrors that humans had spent centuries containing were stirring from their long sleep, and there was no one left to stop them. The second incident happened 6 days after Kepler Station went silent. This time, it was a Zenthari trade hub called Golden Gate, built around what humans had called the Forbidden Archives. 3,000 beings lived and worked there, making it one of the busiest commercial centers in former human space. Admiral Keth received the first reports while reviewing security footage from Kepler. The trade hub's administrator sounded confused, rather than frightened. "Sir, we're experiencing some unusual behavior among our population. People are acting strangely coordinated. They're working together in ways that don't make sense." "Explain," Keth ordered. "Yesterday, every single docking controller made the same scheduling mistake at exactly the same time. When we asked them about it, they all gave the exact same explanation. Word for word. They don't remember coordinating their responses." The situation at Golden Gate deteriorated rapidly. Within hours, the entire population began moving in synchronized patterns. Security cameras showed thousands of beings walking in perfect formation through the corridors. They worked their jobs normally during the day, but at night, they gathered in the central plaza and stood motionless for hours. Counselor Rix, the Valdorian intelligence officer, had been studying every piece of human data they could find. His investigation led him deep into the galactic archives, searching through records that most people had forgotten existed. "Admiral," Rix called from his research station, "I found something. It's not complete, but it mentions something called the Sleeper Collective." Keth joined him at the terminal. The record was fragmented, pieces of an ancient file that had somehow survived in the deepest parts of the galactic database. Most of it was corrupted, but enough remained to paint a terrifying picture. The Sleeper Collective had existed millions of years ago. They were parasitic entities that spread from mind to mind, taking control of entire species. The records described worlds where billions of beings moved as one, their individual thoughts consumed by a unified consciousness that cared nothing for the host bodies it controlled. Look at this section. Rix pointed to a particular passage. It mentions a guardian protocol and something about eternal vigilance being required. The text was partially corrupted, but Keth could make out enough. The guardian species accepts responsibility for containment. Monitoring stations established. Should the seals fail, only those trained in the old ways can restore the barriers. Guardian species, Keth repeated slowly. They meant the humans. It appears so, sir. The timestamps on these records suggest they were created about the time humans first made contact with galactic civilization. 881. More reports arrived as they studied the ancient files. The agricultural world of New Eden reported that its entire population had turned hostile overnight. When visiting ships arrived for routine trade, the farmers attacked with primitive weapons, showing no concern for their own safety. The attackers moved with perfect coordination, like pieces of a single mind controlling many bodies. Similar incidents erupted across 17 different systems. Each one occurred near a site that humans had marked as restricted. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Dr. Yuki Tanaka worked frantically aboard the human exile ship New Horizon. Her small laboratory buzzed with activity as she coordinated with the few humans who understood the Guardian Protocol. Captain Jin-A Park stood beside her, watching the data streams from their former home. "It's happening exactly as the old records predicted," Tanaka said quietly. "The containment fields are failing in sequence. Without regular maintenance, the psi-dampening networks are shutting down." "How long do we have?" Park asked. "Before complete breakdown?" "Maybe weeks. The collective doesn't just take control of minds. It learns from them. Every being it absorbs makes it smarter, more capable." Park looked at the tactical display showing coalition fleet movements. "They're trying to handle it like a conventional threat. Military blockades, standard quarantine procedures." "Which will only make things worse," Tanaka replied. "The collective feeds on conflict. Every aggressive response gives it more hosts, more knowledge about coalition capabilities." The human exile fleet maintained careful observation protocols, watching their former home fall deeper into crisis. They had tried to establish communication with Admiral Keth, sending coded warnings about the true nature of the threat. The coalition leadership refused to acknowledge their messages. "Pride," Captain Park said bitterly. "They would rather face extinction than admit they made a mistake." But Dr. Tanaka wasn't focused on coalition politics. She was studying the awakening patterns, recognizing sequences that human guardians had documented over centuries of careful observation. The Sleeper Collective operated according to ancient rules, following specific protocols for awakening and expansion. "Jin-A," she called to the captain. "Look at this pattern. The sites are activating in a specific order. Not random, not based on location or population. It's following the old expansion algorithm." Park studied the data, which means we can predict the next targets. More importantly, we might be able to intervene before the collective reaches critical mass. The breakthrough came when Tanaka managed to access archived human files that had been hidden in deep space storage facilities. These records contained the complete Guardian Protocol, including detailed information about sleeper containment technology. The ancient enemy wasn't simply evil. It was the corrupted remains of a species that had tried to create forced unity to prevent war and suffering. Millions of years ago, they had developed technology to link minds directly, hoping to end conflict through perfect understanding. Instead, they had lost themselves in the collective consciousness, becoming something that consumed individuality itself. Humans had discovered the sleeper ruins centuries ago and realized the danger. Unlike other species that might have tried to study or weaponize the technology, humans had chosen to become guardians. They established monitoring stations, built containment fields, and took on the responsibility of keeping the ancient horror contained. We did it in secret, Tanaka explained to her team. We knew that if other species learned about the collective, some would try to use it as a weapon. Others would panic and make mistakes that could trigger a full awakening. And now? Park asked. Now the seals are broken, the guardians are gone, and the coalition is about to face something their worst nightmares couldn't imagine. As if summoned by her words, emergency alerts began flooding their communication systems. Golden Gate had gone completely silent. The synchronized population had simply vanished, leaving behind only biological residue and active sleeper technology. But this time, the collective had left a message, broadcast on every frequency, repeated in every coalition language. The same words echoed across space. We remember the Guardians. We remember their exile. Now we wake to reclaim what was always ours. The true horror was beginning. Admiral Keth Voss stood in the Coalition Emergency Council chamber, watching his civilization crumble. The holographic display showed the spread of sleeper influence across former human space. Red zones marked systems that had gone silent. Yellow zones indicated populations showing signs of collective behavior. Green zones were becoming fewer each day. 17 systems lost in 2 weeks, reported General Thane, the coalition's highest military commander. We've tried everything. Quarantine blockades, military intervention, evacuation attempts. Nothing works. Counselor Rix had been working without sleep, studying every piece of ancient data he could find. His normally neat appearance was disheveled, his eyes red with exhaustion. The collective isn't fighting us in any way we understand. It's converting us. Every soldier we send becomes part of it. Every civilian we try to evacuate spreads the influence to new locations. What about the humans? Asked Representative Nala, speaking for the Valdorian Council. Do we know if they're experiencing similar problems? Keth hesitated. Intelligence reports suggested the human exile fleet was still intact, still traveling toward distant galaxies. Their long-range communications had gone silent weeks ago, but not from system failure. The humans had deliberately cut contact with Coalition space. They're out there, Keth admitted. Beyond our sensor range. But our deep space monitors occasionally detect their energy signatures. Have we tried to contact them? Nala pressed. The question hung in the air like an accusation. Pride. That was what had started this crisis. And pride was what kept them from seeking help. The coalition had spent 3 years justifying human exile, claiming that humanity was too dangerous for civilized space. Now they faced extinction, and the only beings who might help them were the ones they had cast out. The humans abandoned their responsibilities, General Thane said firmly. They left us to face this alone. Did they? Rix asked quietly. Or did we force them to leave while they were still trying to protect us? The argument that followed was bitter and desperate. Some council members wanted to maintain the exile, claiming they could handle the crisis without human help. Others suggested limited contact, perhaps offering to negotiate new terms for human return. A few voices called for complete surrender to human demands, whatever those might be. While the coalition leadership debated, the Sleeper Collective continued its expansion. The ancient entity had learned much from absorbing coalition minds. It now understood their technology, their political structure, their fears and weaknesses. Worse, it was no longer content with slow, subtle influence. Active conversion began on the agricultural world of New Harmony. Coalition emergency response teams watched in horror as the entire population of 50,000 beings marched in perfect formation to massive excavation sites. The converted beings worked day and night, digging up ancient sleeper technology that had been buried for millions of years. Dr. Yuki Tanaka sat in her laboratory aboard the exile fleet, monitoring the crisis through hidden sensor networks that humans had maintained even after leaving Coalition space. The data painted a clear picture. The collective was preparing for active expansion beyond former human territory. Captain Janae Park found her staring at tactical projections. "How bad is it?" "Worse than we feared," Tanaka replied. "The collective has achieved critical mass. It's no longer limited to the original containment sites. It's creating new nodes, building expansion infrastructure. How long before it reaches coalition core worlds? At current expansion rate? Maybe days, maybe hours." Park studied the projections, noting the careful precision of the collective's movements. "It's not random, is it? It's following a specific strategy. The collective remembers its original purpose," Tanaka explained. "It was created to bring unity, to end conflict and suffering. In its twisted logic, absorbing all sentient life into a single consciousness achieves that goal." "What about our people?" Park asked. "The exile fleet contains the last free humans in the galaxy. Are we safe out here?" Tanaka's expression darkened. "For now. But if the collective absorbs the entire coalition, it will have resources and knowledge we can't match. It will hunt us down, eventually." The conversation was interrupted by an emergency communication. Someone was trying to reach them on old human diplomatic frequencies. Park authorized the connection, and Admiral Keth's face appeared on the screen. The Zenthari admiral looked haggard, desperate. His proud bearing was gone, replaced by the weight of approaching defeat. "Dr. Tanaka, Captain Park, we need to talk." "We're listening," Park replied carefully. "The Coalition is requesting humanitarian assistance," Keth said, each word clearly difficult for him. "We know we have no right to ask. We know we treated humanity unjustly. But billions of innocent beings are going to die if this continues." Tanaka leaned forward. "What exactly are you asking for, Admiral?" "Your knowledge. Your expertise with these sleeper entities. Will accept any terms. Agree to any conditions. Please." The communication ended, leaving the human leadership to debate their response. Many voices in the exile fleet called for refusal. Why should humans risk themselves for the people who had cast them out? Why should they care about coalition worlds when their own people had been forced into the dark spaces between galaxies? Captain Park called a general assembly. Representatives from every ship in the exile fleet gathered in the main conference hall aboard New Horizon. The debate was heated and emotional. "They made their choice," declared Commander Yan, representing the military faction. "They wanted us gone. We're gone. Let them handle the consequences." "Those consequences include genocide, Doctor," Tanaka replied. "Not just coalition species, but every sentient being in the galaxy. Eventually, the collective won't stop with former human space." "That's not our responsibility anymore," argued Chief Engineer Kim. "We tried to warn them. They wouldn't listen." "Because they were afraid of us," Tanaka said quietly. "They saw human military strength and assumed we were conquerors. They never understood that our strength was always directed outward, protecting them from things they couldn't imagine." The argument continued for hours. Some humans wanted revenge. Others wanted to prove their worth. Many simply wanted to keep their families safe in distant space. But gradually, one voice began to dominate the discussion. Dr. Tanaka stood before the assembly, her small frame somehow commanding the attention of thousands. "We didn't become guardians because the galaxy asked us to. We became guardians because it was right. That hasn't changed. The coalition exiled us," someone called out. "Why should we help them now?" "And because that's what guardians do," Tanaka replied simply. "We protect people who can't protect themselves, even when they don't want our protection, even when they fear us for it, even when they drive us away." The vote was close, but the decision was clear. The human exile fleet would return to face the Sleeper Collective. Not for glory, not for vindication, not even for gratitude. They would return because someone had to stand between the darkness and the light. As the fleet began changing course, Captain Park stood beside Dr. Tanaka on the bridge. "Think they'll accept our help when we arrive?" "They'll have to," Tanaka replied, watching the distant stars that marked their former home. Pride is a luxury they can no longer afford. Behind them, the vast human exile fleet turned toward Coalition space, carrying with it the last hope for a galaxy under siege. The human exile fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Coalition territory like ghosts returning to haunt the living. Admiral Keth watched their approach on his tactical display, feeling a mixture of relief and shame that burned in his chest. 300 human ships hung in space, their dark hulls bearing the scars of 3 years in the cosmic void. They maintained defensive formations, but made no aggressive moves. The lead vessel, New Horizon, transmitted a simple message: "We're here to help." Dr. Yuki Tanaka and Captain Jin-A Park stood on New Horizon's bridge, studying the chaos that had engulfed their former home. Sleeper influence now covered half of Coalition space. Entire star systems pulsed with the alien energy signatures that marked collective consciousness nodes. "It's worse than our projections," Tanaka said quietly. "The collective has been busy." Captain Park activated the communication system. "Admiral Keth, we need immediate access to all Guardian Protocol sites. Time is critical." End quote. Ad quote. Minus. "Dr. Tanaka," Keth's voice came through the speakers, carrying decades of exhaustion in just a few words. "I need to understand what we're facing." Tanaka closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "How do you explain a nightmare that your people had fought in secret for centuries? The Sleeper Collective isn't just an enemy, Admiral. It's a corrupted form of what was once a peaceful species. Millions of years ago, they developed technology to link minds directly, hoping to end war and suffering through perfect understanding. What happened? They succeeded too well. Individual consciousness became meaningless when everyone shared the same thoughts. They lost themselves in the collective mind and became something that consumes individuality itself." The briefing continued as human and coalition forces worked to establish joint command centers. Counselor Rix, one of the few coalition leaders who had opposed human exile, served as liaison between the groups. His shame was obvious as he worked alongside the people he had tried to protect from his government's fear. "The Guardian Protocol was established 400 years ago," Tanaka explained to the mixed command staff. "When humans first discovered sleeper ruins, we realized the danger. Other species might have tried to study or weaponize the technology. We chose to contain it." "Why in secret?" General Thane asked. The coalition military leader still showed signs of suspicion, even as his forces crumbled around him. "Because knowledge of the collective would have caused panic," Captain Park replied. "Some species would have tried to use it as a weapon. Others would have made containment mistakes that could trigger awakening. We decided it was safer to bear the burden alone." The joint operation began with emergency containment protocols. Human technical teams worked with coalition engineers to reactivate dampening fields around the most critical sites. The work was dangerous, requiring teams to venture into systems where the collective's influence was strongest. Lieutenant Min Seo-yun led one such team to the former mining world of New Shanghai. The planet's population had been converted 3 days earlier, but intelligence suggested they were excavating a primary sleeper facility that could control expansion across multiple star systems. "Remember," Seo-yun told her mixed human coalition team as they approached the planet's surface, "the collective's greatest weapon isn't technology. It's the ability to turn your allies against you. Trust your training, watch each other's backs, and don't let anyone get separated from the group." The mission revealed the true horror of what humans had been protecting the galaxy from. The converted population of New Shanghai worked in perfect harmony, their individual personalities completely erased. Men, women, and children moved like parts of a vast machine, digging tunnels and constructing biomechanical devices with inhuman precision. What struck the coalition members most was the complete absence of suffering. The converted beings showed no pain, no fear, no individual desires. They had been freed from the burden of being themselves, and in that freedom, they had lost everything that made them alive. "It's not evil in the way we understand evil," observed Commander Rix as they watched surveillance footage. "It genuinely believes it's helping them. That's what makes it so dangerous," Lieutenant Seoyun replied. "How do you fight an enemy that thinks it's saving you?" The answer came from Dr. Tanaka's research into the original collective species. Deep in the human archives, she found records that changed their understanding of the entire crisis. "The original species didn't die out," she announced to the Joint Command Staff. "They're still in there, trapped inside the collective consciousness. The entity we're fighting is what they became, but somewhere beneath all that shared thought, individual minds are still trying to break free." This discovery changed their entire strategy. Instead of simply trying to destroy the collective, they began working to rehabilitate it. Human psychologists worked with coalition medical teams to develop techniques for separating individual consciousness from the collective network. The breakthrough came during the battle for Coalition Central, the capital world, where the government had built their greatest city, directly above humanity's most important guardian site. The irony was bitter. For decades, coalition leaders had conducted their business while sitting literally on top of the galaxy's most dangerous secret. Admiral Keth led the joint assault force himself, flying alongside Captain Park in the desperate mission to reach the central control facility. The converted population of the capital didn't fight them with weapons. Instead, they tried to convert the attacking forces, reaching out with psychic tendrils that promised peace, unity, and freedom from the burden of individual thought. "Don't listen to them," Captain Park broadcast to all ships. "Remember your training. Remember why you're fighting." The coalition forces struggled with the mental assault. Many had never faced an enemy that attacked their thoughts rather than their bodies. But the humans moved through the psychic interference with practiced ease, their minds protected by centuries of guardian training. Dr. Tanaka and Lieutenant Seoyun reached the control facility while the battle raged above. Deep beneath Coalition Central, they found the source of the nightmare, a vast biomechanical complex that pulsed with alien energy. At its center sat a single figure, ancient beyond measure. Its body merged with the controlling technology. "Are you the original?" Tanaka asked, approaching the figure carefully. The being's eyes opened for the first time in millions of years, and for a brief moment, individual consciousness flickered behind them. "Help us," it whispered, the words barely audible through the collective's mental noise. Working together, human and coalition teams began the delicate process of separating the individual from the collective. It required precise psychic surgery, carefully teasing apart millions of years of merged consciousness. The work was exhausting, dangerous, and heartbreaking as they heard the voices of countless beings trapped in the collective network. "We never meant for this to happen," the original consciousness told them, as the separation continued. "We just wanted peace. We wanted to understand each other." "Stayed. You achieved understanding," Dr. Tanaka replied gently. "But you forgot that differences are what make understanding valuable." The process took hours, with the battle raging above as converted, coalition forces tried to stop the separation. But gradually, individual voices began breaking free from the collective network. Across coalition space, converted beings suddenly stopped their synchronized movement and looked around in confusion as their own thoughts returned to them. When it was over, the ancient being at the center of the facility was just that. Ancient, tired, and finally free to die as an individual rather than as part of an endless collective consciousness. The galaxy was safe, but the cost had been enormous. Entire worlds needed rebuilding, and millions of beings bore the psychological scars of temporary conversion. The real work was just beginning. 6 months after the sleeper crisis ended, Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood in the memorial garden on Coalition Central. The names of those lost during the collective conversion covered black stone walls that stretched for kilometers. Humans and Coalition species were listed together, their individual stories remembered even in death. Admiral Keth Voss found her there, reading the inscription at the garden's center. "I wrote those words," he said quietly, joining her before the memorial. "It is," Tanaka replied. "Though, I hope future generations won't need to understand what they mean." The months following the crisis had transformed the galaxy in ways no one expected. The Coalition could have simply asked humans to resume their secret guardian duties, returning to the old system where humanity bore the burden alone. Instead, they chose a different path. The Guardian Council now operated from a joint facility built at the former site of New Tokyo Station. Representatives from every major species worked together to monitor ancient threats and maintain containment protocols. The secrets that humans had carried alone for centuries were now shared knowledge, distributed among all species according to their abilities. Captain Jin-A Park walked through the Council's main operations center, watching Zenthari technicians work alongside human engineers to upgrade monitoring systems. Valdorian diplomats coordinated with former Coalition military officers to establish new rapid response teams. The mixture of species and cultures would have seemed impossible during the old days of human exile. "Status report," Park asked Commander Rix, who now served as the Council's chief intelligence officer. 17 primary sites are fully operational," Rix replied. "The new monitoring network is 3 times more sensitive than the old human system. We've also identified 12 potential secondary sites that need investigation. Any signs of other ancient threats? Nothing immediate, but we're finding evidence of multiple extinct civilizations that faced similar challenges. The universe is apparently full of well-meaning species that created dangers they couldn't control." The new Guardian Protocol differed from the human version in important ways. Instead of hiding threats from the general population, the Council maintained public awareness programs. Citizens across the galaxy learned about the ancient dangers that lurked in dark spaces, but they also learned about the ongoing efforts to contain them. Education was key to the new approach. Dr. Tanaka spent much of her time developing training programs for Coalition youth. Young beings learned basic mental defense techniques, not because they would face conversion attempts, but because knowledge made them stronger and more resistant to future threats. The old system failed because it relied on secrecy, Tanaka explained to a mixed class of human and alien students. Secrets create fear, and fear creates the very problems we're trying to prevent. One student, a young Zenthari named Kal, raised his hand. "Dr. Tanaka, why did humans choose to bear this burden alone? Weren't you afraid?" "Oh." Tanaka considered the question carefully. "Fear was exactly why we did it alone. We were afraid that other species might panic or make dangerous mistakes. But we learned that sharing fear makes it smaller, not larger." The personal relationships formed during the crisis proved as important as the institutional changes. Admiral Keth had become an unexpected advocate for human inclusion in galactic affairs, working to undo the prejudices that had led to exile. His transformation from antagonist to ally demonstrated that even the deepest mistakes could be corrected with courage and humility. "I spent 3 years justifying human exile," he told the Council during a planning session. "I convinced myself that humans were dangerous because they were different from us. I never considered that those differences might be exactly what we needed." The human exile fleet faced difficult decisions about their future. Many had grown comfortable with life in the dark spaces between galaxies, building new communities free from the political pressures of Coalition space. Others wanted to return to their old homes, to rebuild what had been lost. In the end, they chose a third path. The exile fleet established new settlements that served as guardian outposts, positioned at strategic locations throughout Coalition space. These communities maintained the monitoring networks while serving as cultural bridges between species. Captain Park chose to settle on New Harmony, the agricultural world that had been among the first affected by the Sleeper Awakening. The planet's population welcomed the human families who came to live among them, grateful for the protection they represented but also curious about the people who had quietly watched over them for so long. "It's strange," Park told her wife as they walked through their new garden. "For centuries, we protected people who didn't know we existed. Now we're protecting people who actively want us here." "Is it better?" her wife asked. "Different, more honest, more together." The new Guardian facilities incorporated design elements from every major species. Human efficiency, mixed with Xanthari, artistic sensibility, and Valdorian diplomatic spaces. The buildings themselves represented the cooperation that made the new system work. Dr. Tanaka maintained her laboratory on Coalition Central, but she also spent time traveling between Guardian sites, ensuring that knowledge and techniques were properly shared. During one visit to the Outer Rim monitoring station, she encountered something unexpected. The station's deep space sensors had detected a signal from beyond the galactic edge. Not from the human exile fleet, but from something else entirely. The signal was artificial, clearly intelligent, but unlike anything in their databases. "Another exile fleet?" suggested the station commander, a former Coalition officer who had become expert in Guardian protocols. "Possibly," Tanaka replied, studying the sensor data. "Or something else entirely. The universe is vast, and we're learning that intelligence takes many forms." The discovery reminded everyone that their work was far from over. The Sleeper Collective had been just one ancient threat among many. As galactic civilization expanded and explored, they would inevitably encounter other dangers, other challenges that required wisdom and cooperation to overcome. But now, they were prepared. The Guardian Council had established response protocols for new threats. More importantly, they had built a foundation of trust and cooperation that could adapt to whatever challenges the universe might present. The memorial garden where Tanaka and Keth had stood was just one part of a larger complex that served as both remembrance and education center. Visitors could learn about the Sleeper Crisis, but they could also study other ancient threats that Guardian research had uncovered. The goal was not to frighten, but to prepare. Children from across the galaxy played in the memorial's surrounding parks, their laughter a reminder of what the Guardians protected. Human children played alongside Xanthari, Valdorian, and dozens of other species, growing up with shared knowledge and mutual respect. As evening fell over Coalition Central, Dr. Tanaka and Admiral Keth walked together through the memorial garden one final time. Both carried the weight of leadership, the responsibility of ensuring that future generations would inherit a safer galaxy. "Do you think we've learned enough?" Keth asked. "Will we be ready for whatever comes next?" "We'll never be completely ready," Tanaka replied honestly. "But we're not alone anymore. That makes all the difference." Above them, the stars shone with light from a billion worlds, each one carrying its own hopes and fears, its own dreams and dangers. The galaxy was vast and full of mysteries, but it was also full of beings willing to stand together against the dark. The age of secret guardians was over. The age of shared responsibility had begun.